Yeah, thank you for the floor. First of all, I want to start about describing the status quo. So the status quo is that at the moment politicians can set their own income, and our proposal is that we want to submit a policy that makes sure or that ensures that all elected politicians get the median wage of income in their countries. First of all, in my speech, I'm going to talk about the mechanism, how the money is set at the moment for the politicians. I want to talk about the type of politicians that we want in our parliaments. I'm going to talk about the commitment that this would mean for the politicians. And I want to talk about the positive outcome for the society. So first of all, the mechanism, how politicians set their income at the moment. So first of all, the general idea is that if I pay more, I get better people. I think that's what opening opposition is going to present us. If I pay more money, I get the most valuable persons in the country. But the problem is that we're talking about politics. We're not talking about economy. And why is that a difference? The difference is that we want a different type of persons in politics. What is the type that we want? We want a type of politicians that want to improve their country. That want to leave footsteps in the country and that want to commit something to the society. So first of all, the focus should never be about the economical aspects, like how much money do I get, but the focus should be about how much can I improve the country. So how much can I give to my country? And why is that a problem? What is the benefit by setting our agenda? The benefit is that we want to improve a parliament in our country that is really representing the people. First of all, at the moment, politicians, not everyone can really enter the politics because politics is about money. Why is politics about money? Because you have to present yourself to someone else, you have to sell something to someone else, you have to sell yourself to someone else. Why is that a question of money? It is a question of money because people, they tend to criticize you on how you look like, for example. So the better suit you wear, for example, is a criteria how people think of you. The better suit you wear, the more they think you had success in your life, the more they're likely to vote for you, for example. Which means, on the other side, that we have a quite huge barrier for getting poor people into politics. Why do we want poor people in politics? Because opening or opposition on the opposition side might talk about the fact that even though you're rich, you can represent your country, you can know the situation of poor people. We on our side believe that it might be true, but there are some situations in life that you can't even think of, even if you're the most intelligent person. You just have to see the situations, you have to be in the situations. For example, if the milk prices stay higher, and if you have a high income, you don't really care about the milk prices, if it's get 20 cents up or not. But if you're really at a low income and 20 cents, they are a lot of money for you, you really care about the situation. If we just have the rich people in our parliament, they don't really, they don't really understand the whole situation. And by setting or by lowering this barrier of entrance into the politician system, by lowering this barrier, we get as well the poor people in this, and we get an overview discussion about the whole situation in the country. Meaning, as well the life of the poor people gets represented in the country in an appropriate way. So, yeah, I take your question.
Considering it's pretty impossible for, say, a single mother with a child to make a living on a minimum wage, how will the people who only have money from minimum wage be represented in the government if they now feel they can't make a living off running?
Yeah, that was actually my next point. I wanted to talk about the fact why it's not a real commitment that we want from the politicians, because we think when we talk about the median income of a country, it's considered as a lot of people live with this money and they can survive with this money quite well. So obviously we're representing here money which can ensure quite a good lifestyle. So we're not talking about the fact that you're fearing hunger, for example, not at all. We're just talking about you have a certain decent lifestyle, but you don't get over it. And we're perfectly fine with it, because we talked about already the fact what politicians should be really about, and it shouldn't about your lifestyle or your money. Next thing, what would that mean for our system? What is the good outcome for the system? The good outcome for the system is not just that we have a public debate over all the positions in the country, like the poor and the rich, but we have more money left in the system. We have more money left in the system, meaning that the state can give more money to other issues, but not to the politicians. When we pay the politicians less money, for example, we have more money for the social system. We can provide a better service to disabled children. We can improve our education. We know that we're not talking about such a big amount of money, but it sends as well a sign to the whole public. It sends the sign that the politicians don't work after a different mechanism than the other people. Because what is the normal mechanism in the economy when it comes to setting your own price? You never set your own value in the economy. And why is it like this? Because people sometimes tend to overestimate their own role in the enterprise. If you ask no matter what person in an enterprise, sure, they commit a lot to the company, and sure, they pay a lot of their free time for the country, for the enterprise. The problem is that we have in all the enterprises a neutral mechanism how to set the income, meaning your boss is going to set the income, and it's not about you to decide the income, because then you have a more objective way of setting the income. So we have we start the idea that you can hire up your own income for as you want, actually, and this sends as well a sign to the public, meaning, look, we're not really beyond you. We are like one of you, and we are one of out of your middle. And this sends, in a democratic system, the sign that they're really representatives of the majority of the people. They're not standing above them, they're not standing under them, but they're on an equal level. It's just they decided to commit something to the society and to lead the society to a better future. So lead us out of the middle of the society and not from the top of the society. So in this way, you will never really question the democratic legitimation of our parliament, for example, because you can't blame a certain elite that always sticks to themselves. You can't blame them because they are one of you. So you never try to blame one of you because it's the perfect represent for you. You'll never question this system, and this is going to ensure our democratic system and our democratic process. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think first week, first government, called first week, first opposition.
Right, guys. Welcome everyone here and good morning. So, one of the 2 points that I'll be talking about today with my colleague Clodagh is that although the politicians, although you might set a certain standard if you lower their wages and get a good impression from the people in your country and what the future holds for you, I will talk to you that in fact politicians give up everything in their private life. They're now in a public scrutiny eye. They'll always be scrutinized for something. You can't be the perfect person, which I'll talk about in my rebuttal as well. And the other point that I'll be talking about is that there's a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibilities that politicians hold onto them, and then also how their families are affected by them becoming a politician. So before I do that, I just have a few points of rebuttal. So the truth is, we love it. We might love a job. You might work in an office and you completely love the atmosphere. You love the job you do. You love the people you work with. You know, you love exactly what you do. You love dealing with the clients or with whoever you're dealing with. But at the end of the day, when you come home, you always think about, okay, so when is my salary coming down? Okay, I have to have these bills to pay, have electricity to pay, I have other things to be looking after, my family. So at the end of the day, even though you will love your job, you will still care about how much you're getting out of it. So if you're getting more money out of it, of course you'll care more about the job, and of course you put more enthusiasm and everything into it. At the end of the day, that is a really important thing about the money, that people do care about the money, even though you might not say it out loud, but people do care about it at the end of the day, what they earn, and that they have bills to pay, they have family to look after, they have everything to be looking after. So that's one of the points. So another point is that, the proposition where it's saying that, that will actually encourage the poorer people to get involved in politics, to see that there is more kind of balance and equality out there. But at the end of the day, it's going to be still the same criteria for people to be elected in politicians. So say if those poorer people want to be a politician, they still have to go the same criteria and the same process. So it doesn't mean that if the wage is lowered, the standards will be lowered, or anything like that will be lowered. So at the end of the day, you will have to have the college degree, any other qualifications to be a politician. Another point is that, from the same point is that, so if you're a poorer person and you want to be elected in politics, surely the money that politicians get will actually encourage you to enter the politics, and not the lower money will encourage you to politics. So it doesn't really make any sense. So if those poorer people want to be involved in politics, they will already be involved in politics, and they'll be actually encouraged by the amount of money they receive at the end of the day if they want to get the money out of it. So this will actually not encourage the poorer people to enter politics. It will be the same criteria, and if they want to be involved in politics, they will already be involved in politics, and they will be encouraged by the money that politicians get. And of course, they'll need to be strongly feel about the politics and for the future of their country. You know, just another point from that is that, you know, politicians will always be rejected. There will always be some sort of group of people, like extremists or radicals, who will always say, I don't like this policy, I don't care about what wages they get, I don't like this policy, I don't like this, I don't like this. So it doesn't mean that if their wages are lowered, straight away everyone will feel sympathetic towards them, or else feel, no thank you, or else feel that they should follow that sort of group of politicians if their wages are lowered. So it does not, yeah, I'll take your point.
So do you think just because a group will just not agree to it, which is always so we take the majority which might agree to this, should we just take the majority of them away?
This is not what I'm actually saying. This was just one of the rebuttal points to say that everyone will not be happy. You can't make everyone happy by just lowering the wages. And I'll go through my points, and the rebuttal to that will be interlinked with the point that I'll be talking about, so you can see our solutions further, why we don't want to lower their wages. So going to my first point. So if you're into politics, okay, you give up a lot of things. You give up your private life. There'll be people looking after you, saying, what are you doing on your daily life? You know, they'll be checking up on what, if you're saying, oh, once you help out the poor people who can't get education, but you're actually doing completely different on the other side in the public eye, they'll be thinking, well, if you're saying you're going to do that, why are you doing something completely contradictory to what you're believing? So they're always in public eye. As I said, there will always be people who will reject, no thank you. There will always be a group of people who reject the policies and the solutions that these politicians pose to everyone and for the future of the country. So these politicians, their information, their background information is all exposed to, and it's not even the politicians who their information get exposed, it's even their family members. So say if the politician did this something, or says oppose a kind of dodgy solution or an economic policy, there will always be people, group of people like journalists and like newspapers, magazines, who will go and check their background information about these politicians. What college did they go to? What friends they had? Where did they go on a night out 10 years ago, 20 years ago? What did they do? What pictures they could see and what pictures they could leak to further even downgrade these politicians. So they all know that. No, thank you. They all know that they're exposed to all these things, but they still yet want to enter politics and help the future of the country. So we have to give them this compensation that they actually deserve for all this they have to go through. No, thank you. There will always be under scrutiny. There will always be someone that will reject their policies. And what's even more important in this point is that their life is actually in danger. Sorry about that. Their life is actually in danger. So sometimes if the country is going through an economic turmoil, if the economy is going down, and the politician has to make a decision to make sure that the country will be stable in future, and it doesn't necessarily suit everyone of the country, there will be kind of I suppose remarks going towards these politicians saying, oh, I will kill you, I will kill your family, I will do this and that. They'll always be exposed to these kind of like intense, I suppose, conversations and extensive public scrutiny they have to go through to make a certain decision, even though it might be good for the country. So another point that I'll be talking about is that, and the coder will expand on as well, is that the responsibilities the politicians hold, and that they're always under pressure to help the future of the country, to suit everyone's needs, to help the people in the country. They are setting out the policies, whether it's social or economic, for their country. and they're always under pressure to stay under the budget and to support the majority of the people in the country. For all those points, I am proud to oppose this motion, and Claudia will discuss it further. Thank you. Before I explain in my speech why we are breaking with this motion the system, the self-perpetuating system of politicians who can only be politicians because they had the money to start a campaign to get into politics itself, some words of rebuttal to my previous speaker. She said, at the end of the day, I still care about money. That is true, but we're not talking about the minimum wage, we're talking about the medium wage. Politicians can live with that if the majority of the population can live with it. So in the end, there is money to care about, it's just not the top of the iceberg. And in the end, people who really want money go into economics, not politics, even in the status quo. She said that money will encourage me as a poor person. She said that we say that we want poor people to be encouraged by this motion, but that's not the case. It's not about encouraging poor people to be politics. It's about giving them the possibility to be politicians. That's what we want. And in the end, we don't want it to be encouraged. We don't want people to be encouraged by money to be politicians. Because at the end of the day, it is a hard job, and it should not be about the money at the it should not about the salary, but about giving something back to your country. And in the end, lower wages will encourage the feeling of being represented, to which I come later in my speech too. The status quo is that poor people are being excluded. Jill already told the example with the good suit. How you present yourself. If you got the money to drive from one campaign, if you have the money to run a campaign, if you have the money to spend less time on your actual job, while you, for example, run for being a mayor of a big city, that matters. If you have the networking to have dollars for your campaign, to make big advertisements and make big shows, that matters. But for you have to have the money yourself, you have to know people with money. And in the end, people know people with other money. If you have, for example, a big job in government and can give away work experience, you, for example, give it away to the sons and daughters of your friends, which, for example, won't be the poor people in the country. So we have this elite politician class, which at the moment self-perpetuates it by having money.
Yeah, but still, even in your model, there will be privileged group of society that will engage in politics and wealthy politicians. Why do you think it will be more possible in your model that the poor people will be more possible for them to be engaged in politics?
In the end, in the status quo, we have wealthy politicians. We have parliaments who raise their own salary. At the moment, for example, it was discussed in Germany, if I remember correctly. So with our model, the politicians will have less money. So there isn't the incentive to be a politician because of money. Sons and daughters of politicians will maybe say, I don't want to be a politician because there isn't enough money for me in that. And that is not necessarily a good thing, but on the other hand, it's more likely that politicians will don't need the money to run campaigns, because in the end, they don't get repaid for spending the money to get politicians. So if I know I won't get rich to this job, I won't spend the money to get into the job. And that is what we will change with our motion. With medium wage, one can live without problems, as I already said. But it gives a different empathy for the people I ought to represent. This is, for example, true with the minimum wage. If I work in parliament and think about minimum wage, I maybe think about,
but then again, are the people really worth it? But if I directly feel connected to the wages in my country and am connected to the wages in my country by receiving the median wage myself, and maybe think about, hey, I want to raise this median wage, not only because I care about my country in general, but because I get this direct connection and my salary tells me where my country is at the moment. And if I'm not completely satisfied with that, I have a direct reminder for me to be encouraged to do that in my politics. So if, for example, the minimum wage is discussed in parliaments, I'm thinking about, okay, that is the median wage. I have that directly in front of my eye, and if I wanted to get higher, I maybe would discuss in a different way about minimum wage because I know how the people feel. For example, if the dairy prices rise up, I get to know what it feels like not to be able to drink milk every day in the worst case. And that is maybe an extreme example, but it's a lot different to experience problems yourself than to just think about, oh, maybe some of the population I ought to represent experiences this problem. It's a whole different approach to politics if you are part of the problem you want to solve, because then you are in every way eager to solve it. And we do think that the people feel represented by our motion, and more with than without. If we look in newspapers and see and read discussions about, okay, the politicians are thinking about raising their salary again, I feel, okay, what are they really worth? Do they need the 2,000 euros extra every month? Is that really what their work is about? And if I hear myself that politicians maybe make 2,000 euros a year, I think about, okay, that money can go somewhere else. And maybe that won't be too big. But if I know that the person who sits in me and who sits in the parliament and represents me as the part of the population, I know he or she won't do it because of the money. And that is something that maybe makes myself more interested in politics, more willing to participate, because I know the people at the top really do care about myself. And if we create that feeling in the majority of the people, we will have people who discuss about politics, who engage in politics, local and maybe in the whole country. And in general, participation in politics is a really good thing because we get to talk about the problems. We get to maybe have people who really think about, okay, well, how do I engage with the politics I'm being represented? We don't have the excuse, okay, the people at the top, they can make what they want. I don't have a chance to get there. All they really care about is money. That will not be true, and still the people will think that won't be true. So in the end, we create a different environment by signaling that the politicians won't do their job just because of the money. We will have competent politicians, and since in politics, not the most competent one is chosen, as in economics, more money won't automatically ensure that you get a better person. So in our model, we get the most willing person, we get the most competent person, and we get the person who wants to serve their country most. Thank you.
I thank the second speaker first. Give one call, the second speaker.
Chairperson, I'm going to speak to you on 3 points today. I'm going to expand on what I've mentioned about how different jobs basically deserve different wages. I'm going to talk to you about the kind of politicians that are actually going to run under this model. I'm going to talk about other ways that we can use to understand the poor outside this model that are actually more beneficial to us. Right. First of all, most of my rebuttal is going to be interwoven. But before I begin, I'd like to make a very clear distinction that seems to have been kind of a bit confused throughout the beginning of this debate. There is a very big difference between a minimum wage and a living wage. A living wage is not what is the minimum wage in majority of countries. A minimum wage is one that is clearly known as being a difficult one to live on, and that is not okay. While we agree that it is understandable that it is potentially easy for a politician to understand what it's like to live hand to mouth, we do say that realistically we say that like, or under our model, or we're going to, or what we're going to explain how this isn't actually going to happen, but more so this idea that is brought to us by first proposition, that by these politicians living on minimum wage and understanding how it's then like, will then drive them to raise the minimum wage. We say this basically will not happen. We say there are economic factors that do not allow that to happen straight away. It's why it's not happening currently under our model. We don't think there are these rich politicians currently sitting in our government going, let's make these people suffer. We think if they could raise the minimum wage, they would right now. We don't believe this model will change that. We simply believe that there are economic factors that will affect that. Moving on to my first point, expanding on what Avia has mentioned. Basically, like what we say is different jobs deserve different wages, and we are absolutely okay to say this. We say that like while in politics, money should not be the key factor, we do say that money does have a large effect in it, in the place of a financial compensation for the large effects that are happening on their lives due to them being in the public eye in politics. We say that like when we look at, like we give the example of celebrities, the large reason why celebrities are paid so much more money is because they have to deal with the hassle of the paparazzi and being constantly in the public eye. There is nothing in their private life that is ever allowed out or as ever, unscrutinized. And we say that like for these reasons, a financial compensation is absolutely allowed to these people in like a comparison, for what they're having to go through, right? We say like, why do politicians deserve this financial compensation? And for this we give you 3 reasons, right? The first one being basically everyday life of a politician is gone, right? Your private life is gone. Anything you have done in your past life is brought up in a negative way against you, right? We say that anything you do in the future, if you were 20 years after being what's the English translation of minister, after being like 20 years after a minister, and you get like drunken disorder arrest, there will be a front page newspaper, ex-minister drunken disorder, while were you not in the public eye, you wouldn't be getting that attention, right? We also say that like being in the public eye so much, because you're a politician, also has a large effect on your family. We say that like you would not want to go into this job in a minimum wage and cause like huge adverse effects on your family if you didn't know there was some kind of compensation that your family could appreciate and could benefit from. So we say that like for these reasons, the financial benefit is absolutely correct. The other reasons why politicians deserve the higher wage is because basically what we say is that the citizens in every country are not homogenous. Not every person subscribes to the same political beliefs. While the majority, as was raised in a POI, the majority vote on one, view for a government or a view for people to do, it does not mean that's the view of every single person. And while it might be a small minority of people who disagree with what you're doing, those minority have Twitter. They know where you live. They know where you work. They are absolutely going to hound you. And you will never, there's never a situation where like every single person in the country is happy with you. So no matter what you do, no matter how much fantastic politician that you are constantly under the scrutiny, and you are constantly having somebody at you to say what you are doing is not good, right? I'll take you in a moment. My last point as to why politicians deserve this money is basically due to the radicals. In extension of my last reason, basically there are people who will take it a step too far. We use the example of Brian Cowan, the ex-minister in Ireland, who during the banking inquiries has now come out to say that while he was minister, he received a letter or a post package with a rope and a noose and a letter saying hang yourself. We say there are people who do take the extremes, who do take the radical, and for these reasons a financial compensation is absolutely deserved for this. Okay.
You say one pay a high price to become a politician. We totally agree with that. But you say it's just better with money, and we say no, it's about the knowledge that you make the life for some people better.
Absolutely, and I will bring to that in my next point about what kind of politicians are actually going to run in this. While we don't believe that politicians deserve millions and millions of euro for what they're doing, we do believe that there's a sweet spot in between of not living hand to mouth on minimum wage, but also being compensated for the problems that they have. Minimum wage is in a large amount of countries living hand to mouth. Right, moving on to my second point about what kind of politicians are actually going to run, right? We ask you the question, why would someone, a single mother or a mother or a poor man want to run for politics when they know that they are going to be living forever hand to mouth? We say there may be countries where a minimum wage is livable, but we say the minimum wage is there for a reason, right? We say that it is not a living wage, it is a minimum wage. So we say that why would you want to get involved in this politics if you can't make a living out of it? Nothing. Okay, clarification this day, okay.
It's median wage, not minimum wage. We said that.
Yes, but the motion says minimum wage, so we're going to go with the motion. No, okay, I'm not going to say I got the motion wrong, but I still say what I say stands. Median wage is still along the lines of the average of what most people are living on. We say that like the majority of us living here don't have to deal with the press, don't have to deal with death threats, don't have to deal with radicals. We say for these reasons you still deserve the like financial compensation of the extra money for it, right? However, going on to a second point, what kind of politicians are going to run, right? We say that like the people that are going to run are the people that are in politics at the moment. They don't make their living and their only bit of living off the money that they're making in their wages, right? We say they come from a wealthy background in the past. We say that they have quite wealthy families. We say they already have a store of money there, right? We don't believe that then now saying, oh, I'm only going to get a minimum wage is going to stop them running from politics, right? We say if they have already the wealth there, they're going to continue running for politics, but they're going to now still continue what they believe of like what will best benefit the white middle class male, right? We don't believe that they are going to stop running. However, we do believe that if you are someone who is struggling, if you are somebody who does not have who is not going to be able to make a solid, reasonable living from this because of all the extra problems that our rods are going to have, we believe this is going to deter these people from running, and less people are now going to run because you do not have the financial backing and the financial behind it, right? We say that because of this, we're actually going to end up with more middle-class white males running for politics, and we're actually going to get less of these people who you think are, right? Then moving on to my last point, because I'm really running out of time, is like other ways to understand people who are living in the lower class, right? To this we say that like we've been asked by our opposition that like if you bring them in on the median wage, they're now going to know what it's like to live with these people, they're going to understand what it's like to live in these hard situations, right? For this we say that basically, okay, we have other ways that we can do this. You can like have like a background thing, or you can organize training programs. Okay.
I thank the second speaker first opposition. For the record, the equivalent in the rest of the world of the Taoiseach is the Prime Minister.
Sorry.
No, just information. And I call on the first speaker for second.
Honourable Chair, apparently the opposition has some misunderstandings about the word minimum, median and medium wage. And I think that kind of explains some of their arguments, which I don't want to put in focus anymore, therefore. I think this confusion might come up by the fact that the government didn't define very well what's the definition of a median, and they kind of let it unclear whether how it behaves to an average. The average is counted or calculated by summing up all wages in a country or in a group and dividing it by its members. The median is calculated in a completely different way. If you have a group with 9 people, for example, you will take, and you order them by the wage, you will take the wage of the 5th person. That's the median by the mathematical definition. This has some serious implications in the whole debate. For example, if you have this 9th person, which is obviously the richest one in this scenario, and you make it an income billionaire, it won't change the median. That is very important for the whole situation, because politicians are influenced by the elite, typically. And they, opposition agrees on this point, often look for financial gain and try to influence, to increase their income. Now, if one of the elite tries to influence a politician to become even more rich, the politician doesn't have a motivation to comply to this. In fact, he hurts himself if he does, because if one in a group earns $1 million per month more, that typically means that 1,000 people have to earn 1,000 less in the same period. That's a typical scenario you can see in a lot of situations. If a tiny majority becomes richer and richer, while the majority becomes poorer and poorer. This situation is very bad for the politician if he's paid the median wage. Now, the politician has the incentive to increase the median. And to do so, he has to weaken the elite and to strengthen the majority of his country, of the population. And the best thing to do this is to increase the situation for all people, for the whole population, and not for a tiny elite. It is much better for a whole society if there are a lot of people in the upper class, and not, or in the average upper class, like wealthy, but not ordinary rich. For example, we can see it in some countries in the third world, in the developing countries. There's an elite of tycoons and warlords which are incredibly rich for the country, and the vast majority of the people later are living at the minimum of the existence, with a few dollars a day, for example.
Okay.
The average salary in this country, or wage, would be quite acceptable, but the median is very disastrous, or very low. Yes, I will take the POI now.
Okay, so you, even in your model, the elite, or the elite doesn't necessarily mean that they are all the politicians. Even in your model, there will be the elite group or the upper class. It doesn't have to do with politics. How does this model is going to affect that?
As I mentioned, the elite will, of course, try to influence the politicians any further. They won't stop. We are realistic on that point. But now the new situation is the politician knows that if he tries, or if he actually helps the elite to become richer and richer, he hurts himself. If he accepts illegal money, okay, it's another discussion. It's still illegal, and it will be illegal anyways in the future too. So, to summarize it up, in the current discussion, the specific word of median wasn't set in the focus, but it's important to do so, because the median has, in the kind how it's calculated, a mechanism which has a strong incentive for the politician to strengthen the whole economic in his country and to strengthen the situation of all people, especially the poor one, and to create a great base of wealthy people. Now all politicians will have the same goal, and this goal will be in identity to their egoistic goal, to serve their country the most. And its identity with the egoistic and the altruistic motivation comes by, if everybody in this country is wealthy, I will be wealthy too. And we think it's the best motivation you can give to a politician, and therefore we beg you to propose. Thank you very much.
There has been a mischaracterization in this debate from the whole governing bench. What they bring us in this debate is this stereotypical approach of a politician saying that the politicians people are bad, they do only bad stuff, they only care about themselves, they're self-interested actors, without regarding the fact that voters choose these politicians, and it's largely the voters from the middle class, which compose the majority of the society, which elect them from their issues. I'm going to talk about that later, how that is important to this debate. We bring you 2 points for extension in this debate. First one is why wages are important and how a difference in wages has a harmful effect on politics especially, and the second one, how this shapes policy, how this affects policy overall, and how it makes politics different in the country. A lot of rebuttal throughout my 2 points. So first of all, we always have a criteria on wages on whatsoever. It's usually the criteria of having a decent education, it's having an experience, it's having a responsibility, of course. If you have more responsibility, then your actions are going to be more harmful. It's having more effort, putting more energy into one job. That means you get your wage according to these things. We believe that politicians usually fulfill all of these things, and that's why they need a good wage. If they don't get them, they don't get enough money to do their own job, they can fulfill their own needs. And if you look at the hierarchy of needs, if you don't have enough money, you can never self-actualize. So we're going to have politicians which are never going to be self-actualized and do some good politics. More on to that later. So in these sort of people who have these criteria on wages are usually engineers, doctors, they get higher wages. Still, and we believe politicians should be one of these people who get also higher wages. So why is this very important to politicians? And this is direct rebuttal with the government bench, which are clearly standing that incentivizes people to increase the median wage in the country. Why doesn't it do that? I'm going to talk about 2 types of politicians: elite politicians and new politicians. So how does this affect elite politicians? Elite politicians who already have been in those sort of places without this policy being enacted already do have a lot of money. And if we think that these politicians are as bad as they say, if we go into the assumption that these politicians are self-interested actors who only care about their own money, then they can find very easily other ways, especially in developing nations. Either they have already money, or they find in other ways. Let's say in America they're more influenced by the lobbies because they don't have their own salary is not enough, or they tend to be more corrupt, especially a huge problem in developing nations. We say that corruption might be a case in both of the models, but they tend to be slightly more corrupt, not slightly, but likely they are more corrupt if they get a lower salary because they don't have money for themselves in the first place, not enough money for themselves in the first place. This is how they affect elite politicians. How does it affect new politicians, which come from these lower backgrounds, which want to rise up, which want to make a change in the society? First, these new politicians will not have money, so the elite politicians will create this rigid power structure, which they can crack and get in, because even though they have more new ideas, more progressive ideas, they will never be able to enter the political sphere just because they don't have enough money to do that, and that salary doesn't bring them enough. So they would choose rather another place to work in, such as in a bank, or become an engineer, or become whatever, because there will be money for that, for their own needs. So they don't have their own needs first fulfilled. So we will have less countries with new politicians who are going to bring reforms, who are going to bring more social mobility. We're going to have less social mobility for new politicians in these sort of things, and we're going to have single parties ruling more because of the power that they already have and because of the money they already have. Before moving on to the second point.
But since you know that when you get a politician, you have a decent living wage, but won't get the money back to put much money into a campaign to get to become a politician, doesn't that mean that you don't need the start capital?
By politicians, we just don't mean people only in power, right? We do have politicians which are quiet, poor, but are deputies in their own parliaments. They bring their own issues. They were voted by people. They still could have less money, but they were just voted by people because people know them, they like them, but that doesn't mean that they already have money to progress their own issues or whatsoever. Second point of this extension, how does this affect policy overall? And and in this debate it hasn't been talked a lot about it, so we're happy to bring that into this debate as well. How does it shape economy overall? If we assume, like the government bench brought up, that politicians are self-interested people who only care about raising their own minimum wage, that means that the government as a whole will be more economic oriented than in any other sphere. Why is that harmful? Because nowadays we have a lot of environmental policies which are not being enacted specifically because of the economic damage that they do. These are this is a dichotomy. Environmental policies are always mutually exclusive to economic policies. So we will have people more, for example, going against environmental policies and being more economic oriented. So things like drilling in the United States, which are very harmful to the local populations. Things like fracking, for example, in Romania or whatsoever, which are very harmful to the nature, to the place where people live there, to the local populations, will be more likely to happen because these politicians will care more, as they say, about their own living wages. They want to increase the wages. They will just like fuck up the whole environment, but they will be only economic oriented. I'll take this one. You have 5 seconds.
The politicians do it today already, harming the environment.
Sorry, too late. Too late, sorry.
Because they are forced by the elite now already. So the situation won't change.
But as I said, the elite is more likely to stay stronger in your side of the house because they already have the money, and you will not have in your model new politicians which are going to come in and change somehow the elite because they're not going to have money in the first place. So we told you that even if a government is economic oriented, that doesn't mean that the life quality rises overall. We had cases like in Germany where we have many people like organizing and saying not in my backyard, for example, which was a policy against drilling, against these sort of like very economical, things which bring a lot of revenue economically, but which are very harmful to the environment. And it does not necessarily increase the living standard of a nation if they are only economic oriented. So there could be other things like welfare or something like that, some of these sort of ideas that change the living standard of the people, but we believe, as we explained to you, that this is going to harm more and make the economic oriented more the government, which is very harmful. We urge you to vote.
They don't have to finish their point of information by the time protected time lapses.
Thank you.
May I start?
Yeah, go for it.
Honourable Chair, I'm really glad to sum up this debate for some proposition. And in my debate, I will be talking about 2 main clashes. Both are involved with the incentive of going in. And first, the incentive of why you get in. And secondly, the incentive why you or what you are going to change when you are in there. So first of all, I'm talking about the incentive to when people now start to get into the politicians. What we outside government are standing for is that people who are now going into the government are less likely to only do it for the money incentive, because we think if you're just doing it for the money, you're probably not suited mainly for this, because if you only care about money, you would probably go into economics and not politicians. Because we believe that politics is such a different thing to everything else, because politicians are what the people who are actually able to change something in a nation, who are mainly able to make things better for other people. And therefore we believe that politicians do not fit into the same criteria as the other jobs, and therefore we should talk about them getting not as much money in order for them to have an incentive to go in, to change something in what they believe and for their ambitions. So we want them to go in there to change something. So there are more ambition, they will work more, they would be more likely to give up their life, because they put in their education for this, they really want to do this. Different to the people who are saying, oh, I will get into there because I will get money or because I will get fame, things like this. So they were on opposition, they were talking about that some jobs deserve better compensation than other jobs do. But as I've already said, yeah, we agree that there are jobs that a clean lady cannot get as much as a highly educated engineer. But again, politics is something so different, because of the high influence it has on the whole society, and therefore we should involve them, and therefore the point forwarded about their everyday life being gone. Yes, this might be a problem, but if you have the right devotion, you will cope differently with them. If money is the only incentive, this won't work as well. So therefore, and the other thing, no thank you, which came up about them going into the ambitions. Who do you believe is more likable and would do a better job? The one who goes in there, going money, going to have fun, or the person who actually does it because he wants to change something? And we believe that this is actually doing something for the whole signal to the society, and therefore that the government has a better impression of. Because, no thank you, outside opposition was saying that we only get now money-orientated people in there because now they only get in there to change something, to make the situation better, so they get more money, so they only will now work there for money. But we do not believe, because from the beginning on, the main incentive they have is not money, but it is what they believe in. Yes, please.
Politicians are already incentivized in the status quo to care about the people because those people elect them, and they will not be re-elected if they don't fulfill their promises. How is that any different from you?
Yes, politicians are great actors. They will go stand there and say, I will be doing this, I will be doing this. But in the end, when they are catering for the elite, which we outside government see as the biggest problem, when they are only catering about the people who might influence them with money, this is a problem, and this perfectly leads me on to the motivation with which they have to change something in place. And yes, my partner has talked a lot about the difference between median and minimum, about how here you actually have to change something for the working class, for the middle group, and the poorer, but not only for the government. Because at the moment we see what makes them getting elected is the huge lot of money they get from other people, and we believe that this is a problem, so we take away the money from the politicians in order for them not having this incentive anymore. So if they are going in there without this money, they will actually get an incentive to gain more money by changing the situation for the wider group, and not only the elite, which already does not have the problems we see in the poorer population, and therefore they make the median wage better, which we believe in the overall effect will have a good effect on the whole society, as people will have a better quality of living, have more money in order to improve their life. They were going on with, well, now they will only care about the economic growth and not about the environmental issues, and put them totally aside. But we do not agree to this. They just mentioned in a pure way that they still want to be elected. They wouldn't be re-elected if they put just these points aside, so they will just stand there. But the change is that in the economic aspect, they are more going to cater for the working class to A, get voted again, and to B, get more money for themselves again, and not only catering for the elite, which will give them the money in order for them to change. So there's this slight difference. So, and the other point they were bringing up in the last speech, what the point about corruption, how corruption is a big problem. And we cannot say that we will just suddenly stop corruption. This is like really not possible. But what we inside proposition will do is we will bring it in a more transparent way. We have to find a way of showing the people that they actually get the median wage, which will say we have a more transparent way. Therefore, the problem of corruption would be worse to hide, more difficult to hide, and make the people more understanding. I want to wrap up my speech. So I've given you the incentive of why they are going. Why is it better for people to go in there because of their values and not because of what they're saying? And this point clearly goes to side governments, because we have more ambitious people working there, and we have people with, who are more likely to actually do a change than we have when they are just money orientated. And secondly, the incentive what they are doing in place, that they are catering now for the middle class and not the upper class because of this monetary aspect, because we still think it is a problem, although in politics it shouldn't be a thing. And this is why I beg you to propose.
Yes, everyone okay with being officially voted out and stuff? I think pictures money side. Only both sides are good side. Yeah. Okay, I'll get ready.
Okay, if we were about to have the burden to give arguments on or to defend the politicians, the kind of politicians that the government side is trying to portray during this debate, the corrupted one, the ones that are incentivized by money, only by money in order to be in politics, or by elite of politicians who somehow fail the rich part of the society. We believe that exists, or that will also exist, even in their model, and I'm going to try to explain that later on. Why do what I'm going to bring you throughout my speech? 2 points. First of all, why do we think the wages are important? And in comparison in two groups of politicians, as my partner already did that. And second of all, how this will affect the social mobility or new politicians, and I will extend that point more on that. And third of all, how this will shape the policies, the economic policies of within a country. First of all, some points of rebuttal to the government side. First of all, the opening government brings this idea of how there will be more possibilities for the poor people to be engaged in politics. But we don't really see that going that way. First of all, I'll give the POI and say that even in their model, there will be rich people, a privileged group of society that will be engaged in politics. So they will have the money to engage in politics. So we'll have the power and they will have the lobby to be engaged in politics. So we don't see that how is that going to be changed. We don't see that those people, those rich people, are going to be less incentivized to get into politics, because sometimes we know that they have some political backgrounds that somehow incentivizes them to get into politics. So we don't see how poor people will have more possibilities. Moreover, they give this idea of how with their model the politics will not be about money. We say, as a rebuttal, we say that it will be much more about money than it is, but in a dark side of politics. Why do I mean with that? Is that if those politicians have a medium wage, but they need to fulfill their needs in order to be part of the politics, there will be more lobby, or there will be more attempt to get corrupted or to get money from lobbyists or other groups of interest. So there will be more money for those groups of interest in the side of those politicians. So we see that, but why will that be less transparent? Because if the politician has a wage, like everyone, a wage that fulfills its needs or his needs, everybody knows that's the wage. Even in that model, the lobbying exists. We say that it will be much more. There will be much more incentives for lobbyists and for the politician to be more attracted by them. Yes.
Corruption and illegal money in general is still illegal in the system, as been told before. And if I am a corrupt politician, I won't stop if I have a certain amount of money. I will always want more money. So being corrupt has nothing to do with the wage I'm getting if I can make a decent living of it.
Yes, but the kind of politicians you describe throughout your case, it gives you the idea that the politicians or the people who want to engage in politics, they want to engage only because of money, and we don't see the politics that way. Now, on the first point of extension, why we go there, why we say the wages are important. Two points on that. First of all, the effects of the wages that have in elite politicians, and my partner explained you how they already have enough money, like they are already rich. So those elite politicians will also exist in their model. So we don't see how this will affect the elite, because the closing government says that the elite will have less incentive or less power within their model. We don't see how they're going to have less power. But also in developing countries, we see that they tend to be more in developing countries. Those the other elite politicians tend to be more corrupted if this model is enacted, and we say that that's extremely harmful. Second of all, the second group of people is the new politicians, and why we say this is differently, and why we say this is very important to be pointed out. First of all, we need in politics, we need new people, we need new energy, we need new ideas. But with this model, we say that we won't have. Why we won't have? Like experts on the field, experts in economy, experts in other fields in politics will be less incentivized. Why they will be less incentivized? Because they have already established themselves as very specialized people in specialized areas, and they want to get enough money to live in decent life as they've established themselves. Until that moment, we will have less of those people incentivized to get into politics. But who will be the parties that will have less of experts in their parties? Those parties that are not in power, because those that are in power, they already have or gain other money from other ways, but those that are not in power will now have less incentives to give to those experts in order to engage them in their political parties. And we say that that's extremely harmful, because we believe that the politicians or the experts within, as a politician, shape the policies that we can enjoy the goods coming out, or the outcomes of those policies. And if we have less people or less experts engaged in making these policies, we believe that that's going to be harmful for the policies. They say that in a practical manner, the opening government says that if we take away those money that we spend for higher wages, we will spend them for social services and for other services. We believe that the politics doesn't really work that way. The politics works on establishing policies in order to do those things, not only getting some money from some people in order to enact a policy. We believe that by having less experts, we will have less policies. We will have only to spend those monies. We will have less new policies in their model. Thank you.